Okay, Vince, over to you.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to the March 4, 2020 edition of the Cluster API State Cluster Lifecycle project meeting. As always, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. We have an agenda doc. I'll post the link in chat for folks to edit, or if you want to add yourself to the attending list. As first, we want to welcome you folks that are joining for the first time today. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, I'll pause it for a few seconds. All right, let's proceed with the PSAs. So we have two PSAs. The first one, RC3, is dropping today, probably around this afternoon. And we have a few more PRs ongoing. And if you have anything that you would like to get merged, feel free to reach out. We'll try to make that happen. The .0 release, 0 for V1 Alpha 3, it's still probably happening on March 10th, which is in 6 days. This is a huge milestone for the project, and I honestly want to thank everyone for the great work that you all have put forward. We had great proposals and new features like control plane, machine pool, etc. that it will make the best release ever. Any questions on that? All right. We have a demo, Alberto, for the autoscaler.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep. I'll stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Okay, cool. So I'll try to share my screen. I'm not really familiar with Zoom. Okay, so can you see my screen now? Okay, awesome. So yeah, we are introducing support for the cluster API provider for the cluster autoscaler. So I just wanted to demo that quickly today. I went through the quick start for the cluster API. So I got a cluster API compliance cluster up and running. So we can see here, we got a management cluster with a few machines. And we got here a workload cluster with a few nodes which are backed by the other machines. So I'll go and run the cluster autoscaler now, pointing to the cluster API provider. Once that's running, what I'll do next is I'll apply this job on the workload cluster. So it will run a bunch of pods so we can actually see how it triggers the autoscaler to scale out. So I'm gonna do that now. Okay, so we should start to see those pods being created. Because there's not enough capacity, we see that the autoscaler already triggered scale out. So it said, I'm getting the replica number for the machine deployment here, and we see that it went from 1 to 6. So we should be able to see all those machines being created now. So that's happening already. So usually, eventually, these machines would become nodes in the cluster, but to keep it short, I'll just go and delete the workload so we can see the autoscaler triggering the scale down. Okay, so those pods should start to go away pretty soon, and we should see the autoscaler scaling down in a bit, hopefully. Yeah, you see here how it's starting to add candidates to being deleted. So those machines should enter deleting phase. Okay, we see that's happening now. So the replica number was set back to 2 and will eventually will be back to 1. And that's pretty much all I wanted to share. So that's the end of
This
the
is
demo.
amazing. I mean, every time I need to scale up the cluster, I run a simple playbook that just adds a node and puts a specific label on it. But with this, wow, I'm impressed.
Cool. Thanks.
Great work. Oh, Andrew has a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, what is the state of this in terms of the relevant code bases? Are there PRs open? Like, how could I try this out is basically my question.
Yeah, definitely. So we got a PR in place that it was there for a while. We recently revived the effort on that PR, and we've been discussing here within the cluster API community and also with the cluster autoscaler community. And we got agreement and consensus that we want to move forward with that PR. So the next steps are for, so we got basically approval from the autoscaler side of things, and we now need the final look good to me on that PR from the cluster API side of things. So Jason is already, he already shared some feedback there. Hopefully that would be merged like Jason. Once that happens, we'll have, like, the main goal now is to have something like one common place for everyone who is interested in this can collaborate and we can work together. So after that get merged, we'll proceed like really quick with follow-ups to make it better.
It seems like someone also dropped a link to the cluster autoscaler PR in the meeting doc. And just from my understanding, this targets V1 Alpha 2, I believe, or?
Yeah, so currently in the PR, we have hard-coded version for V1 Alpha 2, but that's like, we already, like Jason dropped some feedback on there, and once we got it merged, we probably put a follow-up to use a discovery client. So instead of having the version hard-coded, the provider should be able to find the latest version available and just use that one.
Got it. Great work. Any other questions for Alberto before we move on? Going once. Andrew's asking, that shouldn't be a problem even when the conversion webhooks, right?
I'm not sure about that. I don't believe so.
Well, at some point we'll drop support for Alpha 2 and we'll just have like 3 and 4 and whatnot. So it would make sense to use the discovery client, I think. Or was that not what you were asking, Andrew?
Oh, no, definitely more around the timeliness of needing to make that change, less around whether we should.
Yeah, exactly. That's why when I provided feedback on the PR, I didn't consider kind of the hard coding of V1 Alpha 2 to be an immediate blocker, but rather something that we want to address for future versions. And I provided some other feedback too on places where I think we can streamline the integration to avoid potential skew between at least foreseeable versions of Cluster API to make that more seamless.
Awesome. Any other question? All right. Moving on. Seems like someone is typing on my screen. El Nico, over to you for discussion topics.
Yeah, so this is kind of a follow-up to the demo that Alberto just gave. I want to say yesterday we had kind of an ad hoc meeting. We kind of started to organize this last week, but it mainly talking about this autoscale integration effort. And I think Alberto kind of covered most of what's going on here. You know, we have good consensus from the upstream autoscaler community. They're just kind of going over a few details on the PR we put up there that's linked in the doc here. And then, you know, if you scroll down past today's meeting in the notes, you see we took some notes from this meeting. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. We brought up, you know, a bunch of the issues we were looking at in terms of, I think, the work that needs to be done with autoscaler. And then kind of at the bottom, we had some action items for things that we'd like to do next. You know, just mainly around, you know, some documentation that needs to be done, some cleanup that needs to be done. You know, like was noted, the hard coding of the API types. You know, there are definitely some cleanups that should happen in this PR after it goes in. I think right now we're trying to get it to the point where it's good enough to accept, and then we can go back and start to do some of these more aggressive cleanups. And I guess, you know, I think Alberto did a great job of covering everything, really. I think Michael wanted to talk a little more about one of the UX issues here. So I don't really have much more to add, but I will kind of pass it over to Mike for that.
Okay. This is just the action item I had from the meeting. So basically, the upstream autoscaler has what we call scale from zero. So you can tell it, hey, I want to scale this thing. I don't have any nodes in it yet, but whenever it's appropriate, go ahead and scale it. It does that because it bakes in like the CPU, RAM, GPU information into the autoscaler code for each supported cloud provider. So it knows that like a M5 large or whatever, M5B large is however many CPU and RAM. Obviously, Cluster API, we're trying to abstract away the cloud, so it can't just look at a machine set and know magically how much RAM it has, because it's not necessarily cloud specific. So we came up with a demo downstream internally where we had a new controller that was cloud specific, just going in and annotating the machine sets and whatnot, and then having the autoscaler look at that information if it was available to help it make its scheduling decisions. So right now the Cluster API autoscaler integration, what it does is it reads the CPU and RAM off of an existing node, and that's how it determines how much RAM and everything it has. And so if you have 0 of them, it doesn't know how much it has, so it has to figure out how to scale from 0 using the autoscale. It's a pretty common feature. Everybody's like, yeah, I want to scale this down to 0 overnight so I don't waste money, and then the autoscaler does its thing in the morning or whatever. So there's a multitude of different ways we can accomplish this. There's probably more ways than what I mentioned in proposal pull request. The key takeaways we had from that meeting were we're going to need to probably come up with something that's going to pass API review, so annotations by themselves might not fly. And we also need to come up with something that the autoscaler people are going to want to agree to. So I put out some ideas to get the conversation started. I'm not too attached to any particular idea, but I think they all would work from a technical sense. So if we could just, everybody that's interested in this problem, look at some of the proposal ideas, leave some feedback, figure out 1 or maybe 2 ideas that we want to take to the autoscaler folks and see what they think about it, and move forward from there. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Justin?
That's really awesome. I just wanted to ask, the right place to comment is on 2530, the PR, or it is somewhere else?
I think that makes the most sense because it's got a proposal doc with it, so you can comment on any particular part of it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other question for Michael or Miko? Andrew?
Yeah, Michael, I also think you were the one that had there was like a capabilities proposal. I'm curious if something maybe adjacent to that would help make this easier for kind of like the abstraction bits, like if providers were able to report up the capabilities of individual machines, including like capacity style items.
Yeah, so here, the auto scaler, right? Once you have a machine, it's too late because the machine's already there. So what the auto scaler needs to know is from the machine set level. So it's kind of a similar idea, but instead of information flowing from provider machine to machine object, we're going from some new provider controller to machine set or machine deployment, or ideally both of those places. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
The features thing actually have a small PR out for that already, so if you're interested.
Thank you. Any other question before we move on? All right, James, support for managed cluster.
Hi, I'm new to the group, and I'm particularly interested in the support for managed clusters, and just wanted to see where the status of this is and how I could potentially get involved.
So
if anybody's working on it or anything like that.
So I don't think so. There was a proposal that like was added. There is still a PR up. It's a work in progress. The PR is 2045. Can add it to the meeting notes. There was a lot of back and forth on this, and I think this is actually a good place to start. Like if you want to start putting your thoughts together or like provide feedback on like what this proposal like entails. I don't know if Wanli is on the call, but they also expressed interest in working on this. But yeah, this like in general, like right now, like we're ending up the 03 cycle, so like this is actually like a really good time to start working on proposal for the next cycle.
Okay, cool. How does the proposal, like how do we, after we get consensus on this, how do we move that forward to like the next step? Am I able to bring that to the next meeting, or how does that work?
Yeah, in the past we had like a few different ways to go about this. So the first step was like definitely open an issue and like start discussing on it. If there is enough consensus, like we usually move to a Google Doc first and then to a PR. In this case, like the PR is already up, so I would suggest like to keep working on the PR. If you feel like it might be better to move to a Google Doc or like in another place, feel free to do so. Cluster Autoscaler, for example, this morning just schedule like a meeting to get together with folks that were interested, and which is like separate from this meeting, and then bringing in like kind of like outcomes.
Okay, cool. I'll start with looking at this and connecting with the folks that have been commenting so far.
Sounds good. There's definitely a lot of interest in this, so I'll definitely suggest to reach out in Slack as well to see if people want to collaborate. We also have a mailing list that you can use.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other question on support for managed clusters? All right. Before I go into the backlog grooming, I think we actually only have one issue open that needs triage, and that's the cluster autoscaler one. Is there any other discussion topic on things that people want to talk about?
I would raise my hand, except I can't since I'm the host. I think a good follow-up on James's question about managed clusters and what you were just saying, Vince, about wrapping up 0.3 is that now is the time, or very shortly will be the time, to start solidifying what we want to do in our next release. We do have a roadmap document that is published, and Vince is going to pull it up here. So if there's stuff that's in the roadmap that you want to work on or that you're interested in, please take a look. If there's stuff that's not in the roadmap, this is a draft, or constantly evolving at least. So there may be GitHub issues that have been filed, or maybe you've got stuff in your head that you haven't filed yet that could be appropriate for our next release. So I would encourage everybody to think about this. And if you've got proposals or ideas that you haven't filed yet, please do so. And we will be beginning our 0.4 planning basically any day now, as soon as we can get 0.3 closed out, so that we don't have a lag where we spend 2 months planning for 0.4 before we start really doing any work on it.
Thanks, Andy. Any other question? All right, so in terms of issues, there's only the cluster autoscaler from 0, at least with issues, with no milestone. I think this one, we could probably move it to next for now, like set it next, and then see at the next kind of grooming backlog, where does this fit? It's probably going to be 0.4 at this point. In terms of RC3, there is only this issue that's open, machine pool to experimental, and there's a PR up already for this, so I think this can be closed soon after the PR has been merged. As I mentioned, the RC will happen today. If there is any other changes that we should make, let's try to make that happen for the end of the day.
Vince, do you want to maybe put out a call for if anybody's interested in seeing what the release looks like? You could maybe Zoom it later today.
Sure, I can do that. It's gonna be probably late PST, but like around 4 or 5-ish. But yeah, I'll post a link if someone wants to join. Glad to have company. All right, with that, I think if there's no any other topic, I think we can give you almost 34 minutes back. All right, thank you, everyone.